A 3-year-old boy in the middle of a stormy night screams at the top of his lungs, "Someone's climbing through the window." His parents burst into the room window wide open, rain pouring in, blankets scattered. But Noah isn't crying. He's clutching thin air, holding on to something no one else can see. And then with trembling breath, he whispers, "Buddy didn't let him near me." The baby monitor sends out a motion alert. Police arrive. And deep in the woods behind the house, the intruder stumbles and shrieks in terror. "There's a dog chasing me with glowing eyes." But this family doesn't own a dog. The baby monitor mounted at a corner above the crib whirred quietly. A red light blinked on. Then the screen flickered and adjusted focus. Noah stirred. 3 years old, barely more than a bundle of hair and curiosity, Noah had pulled his blankets to his chin. He wasn't asleep, not yet. His tiny voice broke the silence. "Buddy, I'm not going to sleep if the door's all the way closed." He wasn't talking to the camera. His eyes weren't looking up at the ceiling. He wasn't dreaming. He was looking at the floor. The shadow near the foot of his bed. Down the hallway, Emma and Kyle sat curled up on the couch, laptop open, sound low. The baby monitor screen sat between them. Emma glanced at it, hearing her son's voice. She smiled. "There he goes again, buddy." Kyle chuckled. "The imaginary dog, huh? That's new. Started 2 weeks ago, ever since we moved here. He's just processing stuff. Change is weird for kids." Emma watched the monitor a moment longer. Noah had turned onto his side, facing the wall. The screen showed nothing unusual. No sounds, no movement. Just a sleepy kid, whispering to the dark. She leaned back. "I guess it's cute." But Noah hadn't said it like it was cute. He said it like it was a rule, a warning. That night, sometime around 2:18 a.m., the monitor picked up movement again. Not major. A slight shift of light, a flicker of contrast, as if something passed in front of the camera. The audio spiked. Not a loud sound, but sharp. Like breathing, rough, raspy breathing. Like something exhaling just below the microphone. Then tapping, not footsteps. Tapping, like nails on wood. Just 2 or 3. Then silence. Kyle stirred on the couch, but didn't wake. Emma had already gone upstairs after midnight. On the screen, Noah didn't move. His body was perfectly still. But his eyes were open. Wide open. Fixed on something beneath the bed. His lips moved. The camera didn't catch the sound. Then he blinked. A slow, heavy blink. And turned over, clutching the edge of his blanket like it was armor. The camera clicked as it adjusted focus again. That's when it appeared. Barely perceptible at first. A patch of darkness that was darker than the rest. At the foot of the bed. Not a shape so much as a void. 4 low points grounded. A low curve of a back. A shift in weight. It didn't move. It just existed. Then the screen buzzed faintly, and the shape vanished. Morning arrived with golden light and a deceptive sense of normalcy. Kyle made coffee. Emma packed a small bag for daycare. Noah sat in his high chair, Cheerios scattered across the tray, and looked tired. "He didn't sleep much," Emma said, stirring his milk. "Kept tossing, talking in his sleep." Kyle opened the monitor log. Weird. The camera's auto-flagged movement at 2:18. Emma walked over. "Can you pull it up?" They both watched the footage, grainy grayscale, time-stamped. Noah's form in the crib, the subtle flicker, the quick distortion in the corner of the frame. "That's nothing," Kyle said, rubbing his eyes. "Lens glitch." Emma frowned. "Rewind. Go back 10 seconds. They did, and there it was. Not quite a shape, but a presence. A stillness that didn't match the rest of the image. And the sound, barely audible through the tiny speaker, was unmistakably animal. A low, wet breath. Emma's arms prickled. "That's not Noah." "No, it's not," Kyle admitted finally. That evening they tried to ask Noah. "Sweetie," Emma said, gently kneeling beside him as he lined up toy cars. "Who's Buddy?" Noah didn't look up. "He's my dog," he said matter-of-factly. "But you don't have a dog, remember?" "I do now." "Where did Buddy come from?" "He was already here." Emma blinked. "In the house, in the floor, but only at night." Kyle exchanged a glance with Emma. "Is Buddy scary?" he asked. Noah looked up serious. "No. Buddy's the good dark." That night, Emma left the door slightly ajar, just like Noah had asked. The hallway light cast a beam onto the carpet, fading near the foot of his bed. She lingered a moment longer. "No monsters," she whispered, brushing his hair. "You're safe." "Because of Buddy," Noah replied. Emma kissed his forehead and left. The door creaked as it settled in place, open by just a sliver. 2:42 a.m. The monitor picked up sound again, this time louder. Breathing, then a low growl. Not threatening. Protective. The kind of sound dogs make when someone's too close to their territory. Noah didn't wake. The hallway light flickered. A shape moved across the doorway, casting a brief shadow across the crib wall. 4 legs. Low and steady. The camera trembled, and then the unmistakable sound of claws on hardwood pacing slowly. 1 circle, then 2. Then the shape sat, right at the foot of the bed, watching. Morning came with tension neither Emma nor Kyle could explain. The monitor footage was more corrupted than usual. Flickers jumped split-second distortions. But in one frame, one perfect still, the shape was there. 4 limbs, a hunched back, ears upright. The muzzle, though blurred, pointed toward Noah. It wasn't a trick of the light. Emma printed it out. Kyle shook his head. "We can't show him that." "Why not?" she asked. "Because if this is something psychological, we're reinforcing it." Emma stared at the photo. "And if it's not?" They began researching the house. Public records, rental history, old police logs. Emma made a call to the county clerk's office. "Has anything unusual ever happened at this address?" The woman on the other end paused, then lowered her voice. "That house, yeah. Something about a break-in years ago. I think a dog died trying to stop the guy. Big case. Made the papers. Poor thing. Got buried on site, I think." Emma's breath caught. "What kind of dog?" The woman sighed. "A mutt. Brown coat, white paw. Name was Buddy, if I remember right." Emma didn't speak for a long time. That night she left the door wider than usual, and she whispered to the dark, "If you're here to protect him, thank you." Downstairs, the monitor screen glowed softly. Noah curled under his covers, thumb in mouth, eyes closed in peace. At the foot of his bed, the darkness gathered calm and still. Not menacing, not cruel. A presence, a promise, the good kind of shadow. The kind that watches, that stays, that guards, that loves. And through the monitor speaker, a soft sound drifted out. A low-content breath, like a dog, finally home. There was something about the house that made people hesitate, though no one ever said exactly what. From the outside, it looked perfect, modest, white-paneled, with green shutters perched at the edge of a thicket of trees in southern New Jersey. The street was quiet. The rent was low. Too low. Emma and Kyle barely blinked at the deal. They were new parents, still scraping by after medical bills and a job relocation. When the landlord said the last tenant left, suddenly they figured it was just another couple who couldn't handle the isolation. And besides, Noah was too young to care where they lived. Or so they thought. The first night, the silence was almost suspicious. After the movers left, and the furniture stood awkwardly in strange corners, Emma sat on the steps to the upstairs hallway and listened. Just quiet. No traffic, no neighbors yelling, no sirens. Only the trees whispering behind the house and the old floorboards settling beneath years of dust and stories. Kyle, forever pragmatic, had shrugged it off. We should be grateful. This kind of peace is rare. Emma didn't say it out loud, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like a held breath. The second day, the welcome committee arrived in the form of Mrs. Clara Pennington, the elderly woman next door. She brought a pie cherry with a crust like cracked porcelain and stories that hung in the air like cobwebs. "They didn't tell you, did they?" she said, after introducing herself and asking too many questions about Noah. "Didn't tell us what Emma asked, polite but guarded." Clara smiled a little too wide. "About the break-in, years ago. The story's fuzzy now, but someone tried to get in one night. It was strange, violent." Kyle stiffened. "Did someone get hurt?" Clara nodded slowly. "A child almost did. But the family had a dog. Brave thing. I don't think he survived." Emma went still. "What kind of dog?" "I don't remember. Big, I think. The cops came, but no one talks much about it anymore. Some things, people just want to forget." She left shortly after, but her words lingered long after the scent of pie had faded. Noah refused to step into the backyard. Emma noticed it on the third day when the sun broke through the clouds and she opened the back door to let fresh air in. "Come on, sweetie," she said cheerfully. "Let's go see what's out there." Noah stayed frozen at the threshold. "No," he said flatly. Emma crouched beside him. "Why not?" "It's just the yard." He didn't look at her. He stared into the tree line. Buddy said, "Don't go." Emma smiled tightly. "Buddy again." Noah nodded. "He says the woods are bad." Behind them, the trees rustled. Just the wind. Just wind. But the kind that feels like it's watching. That night, Emma lay awake longer than usual. Kyle was snoring beside her, one arm flung over the edge of the bed. She stared at the ceiling fan spinning shadows across the walls. Then it came. A bark. Not loud, not near, but unmistakable. It echoed faintly distant hoarse, almost mournful. Emma sat up listening hard. Nothing. Just the tick of the hallway clock and the house groaning under its own memories. She got up and tiptoed to Noah's room. The door was open, as always. He was asleep, peacefully. The baby monitor camera blinked steadily. She turned to leave, then paused. There it was again, a low bark, just outside the back of the house, this time closer. She walked to the window and pushed aside the curtain. The yard was empty, save for leaves swirling like ghosts across the patchy grass. Emma narrowed her eyes. Just shadows. The next morning, she told Kyle. He laughed. "Probably a stray. There's woods all around us." "But we don't hear it during the day," she said. Kyle shrugged. "It's a dog. It sleeps during the day. It barks at night." That's what dogs do. Emma wasn't so sure, especially not when Noah began stacking his toys against the back door. Every evening after that, like clockwork, Noah dragged his foam blocks to the back entrance and began piling them carefully. "What are you doing, buddy?" Emma asked, crouching beside him. He didn't look up. "I have to keep it shut." Emma smiled softly. "The door is already closed." "It's not for us," Noah whispered. "It's for Buddy." Emma's stomach turned. "Why?" "He said it's where the bad man comes." She stared at him, trying to make sense of a 3-year-old's world. What bad man? But Noah didn't answer. He just pressed his small hands flat against the glass, watching the woods, waiting. Later that week, Emma found herself Googling old newspapers, something she told herself she was only doing out of curiosity. Break-ins, dog attacks, obituaries. The internet yielded little, just a vague mention of a home invasion near their address over a decade ago, with no further details. The night after that, the barking came again. But it wasn't just one bark. It was a growl, low, deep, long, and then a whimper, like something wounded. Emma gripped the bed frame and didn't move. The sound faded. But it left something behind. Not a presence, not a shape, a dread. The next day, Emma visited Clara again. The old woman didn't open the door at first. When she did, she looked older, like someone who hadn't slept well in years. "You're hearing him, aren't you?" Clara asked without preamble. Emma froze. "The dog..." Clara nodded. "You should leave." Emma blinked. I'm sorry." "Leave before the past finds its way back in." "That's not an answer." Clara looked over Emma's shoulder toward the house, like something might be watching. "There's loyalty, you know, even after death. Sometimes, especially after." Emma tried to press her, but Clara shut the door gently, as if closing a chapter she refused to reopen. That evening, Kyle walked into the living room holding his phone. "You need to see this," he said. It was the baby monitor footage. He'd finally synced it to the app on his phone. The video was from 2 nights ago. The frame was centered on Noah's bed. Nothing seemed unusual at first. Then a shift, near the edge of the screen. Something pacing, 4 legs. The slight thud of paws on wood, and then it stopped. For a split second, the shadow froze. A dog's silhouette. Ears pointed. Eyes 2 small glints staring directly at the camera. Then it vanished. Emma, Kyle said softly. "We don't own a dog." That night, Emma sat beside Noah as he prepared for bed. "Buddy comes every night?" she asked gently. Noah nodded, hugging his stuffed elephant. "Why?" "To make sure the man doesn't come." Emma swallowed hard. "What man, honey?" Noah looked at the window. "He lives in the trees." At 2:47 a.m. the barking returned. This time there was a sound with it. Metal scraping, like nails on glass. Emma ran to the hallway, heart in her throat. Kyle was right behind her. They burst into Noah's room. He was sitting up, eyes wide, staring at the window. The backyard security light had turned on. Outside, nothing moved. No footsteps, no animal, just light. And then it shut off. Noah pointed. Buddy said not to open it, ever. Emma looked at the lock. It was twisted slightly, bent, as if someone had tried to force it from the outside. The police came the next day. They found no footprints, no signs of intrusion. The backyard was undisturbed, except for one thing. In the dirt beneath the window, a paw print, fresh, large. Too large for any ordinary stray. Too precise. Too deliberate. Emma and Kyle stopped laughing about Buddy after that. And Noah, he never once seemed surprised, as if he'd known all along, as if someone had been whispering to him since the first night they arrived. A warning, a promise, a presence in the shadows, but not one to fear. Because sometimes the darkest places hold the brightest protectors, and sometimes a ghost doesn't haunt, it guards. It began subtly. No crashes, no flickering lights, just the camera blinking more than usual. Emma noticed it first. One morning, over a bowl of cereal and the smell of burnt toast, she scrolled through the motion log in the baby monitor app. There were 3 flagged moments from the night before: 1:12 a.m., 2:39, 3:03. She frowned. Noah had barely stirred when she checked on him. And yet the monitor showed motion detected every hour almost precisely. She tapped the first one. Static, then clarity. Noah curled under his covers. No movement. Then a subtle shift of pixels at the bottom of the frame. A strange grain like compression errors, but organic somehow, like something had breathed across the lens. Emma replayed it 3 times. Whatever passed the screen wasn't wind or dust. It was too deliberate, too grounded, like a body brushing just out of frame. She didn't show Kyle that morning. She couldn't explain why. Maybe it was because he always needed logic, rationality. She wasn't ready for logic. She wanted truth. That afternoon, while Noah napped, Emma watched another clip. This one from 2 nights ago. It started with the same peaceful silence, the usual hum from the white noise machine. Then Noah's eyes opened, wide, aware, not groggy. He didn't look at the door or the nightlight. He looked down, past the edge of his bed, right where the blanket ended and shadows began. And he spoke. Whispers, inaudible. But his lips moved, clear enough to read. "Buddy, are you here?" Then a pause. His eyes shifted, following something that wasn't there. He nodded, then smiled faintly, and lay back down. Emma paused the video, her heart clamped in a cold, quiet fist. He wasn't dreaming. He wasn't inventing. He was seeing something. By evening, she had watched at least a dozen clips. All the same pattern. Noah staring downward, sometimes smiling, sometimes whispering, sometimes scooting slightly, as if making room for something at the edge of the mattress. At one point in one video from 4 nights ago, he reached out off camera and held his hand in the air, still, as if waiting for something to touch it. And his fingers moved just slightly, as if they were being nuzzled. Emma closed the laptop slowly, swallowing hard. She didn't want to be alone with these thoughts anymore. That night, she brought it up to Kyle. "There's something weird with the camera," she said carefully. He glanced up from his phone. "Weird like how, just like it keeps triggering when there's no movement. And Noah keeps looking at something near the foot of his bed." Kyle raised an eyebrow. "You think the camera's glitching?" "I think it's picking something up," she replied, her voice quiet. "Something we can't see," he snorted, like a ghost dog. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He smiled, trying to lighten it. She didn't smile back. "Kyle," she said, serious now, "I'm not saying I believe it, but I'm saying Noah believes it. And that monitor is catching things, sounds, shapes, his reactions. It's not nothing." Kyle exhaled and put down his phone. "Okay, I'll check the hardware. Could be interference, could be bad firmware, who knows." He unscrewed the monitor from the wall late that night, checked wires, cleaned the lens, updated the firmware, reset the motion sensitivity. "There," he said, proud. "Back to factory settings. Let's see how spooky it gets now." Emma didn't answer, but she didn't sleep either. Sometime past midnight, Noah cried out. Not a soft, sleepy whimper. A sharp, panicked wail that cracked through the floorboards. Emma was up before Kyle's feet hit the floor. They bolted down the hallway. Emma flung the door open. Noah was sitting bolt upright in bed, sweat slicked across his temples, breath ragged. His tiny arms were outstretched in front of him, grasping at air. "Buddy, buddy," he sobbed. "He can't find me." Emma ran to him, gathering him into her arms. "It's okay, baby. It's okay." "No," he cried louder. "He got lost. Buddy's lost." Kyle flipped on the light. The room was empty. The camera, newly reset, blinked steadily in the corner. Emma looked at it, then at her child. Noah buried his face in her neck and shook. "Tell him I'm here," he whispered. "Tell him I'm still here." They didn't sleep after that. Emma sat in the rocker, Noah curled in her lap like he used to when he was a baby. She rocked him slowly, humming old lullabies through her teeth while her mind raced. Buddy got lost. Lost how? The dog, if that's what it was, had been appearing every night. Steady. Protective. What had changed? Only one thing. The camera. The next morning, Kyle showed her the clip. He had downloaded it from the app before resetting the system. Emma watched in silence. It started as usual. Noah in bed. Still, calm. Then suddenly he jolted awake, eyes wide. He looked around frantically. Then he began to cry. He reached under the bed, clawed at the sheets. No. His tiny voice broke. No, where are you? He got out of bed and went to the corner. To the camera. He looked directly into the lens and whispered, heartbroken, "You turned it off. Now Buddy can't find me." Emma covered her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. "He thinks it's a beacon." Kyle stared at the screen. Jesus. That night they didn't say a word about ghosts or spirits or anything irrational, but Emma put the camera back. Exactly where it had been, facing the bed, light blinking, and she turned the door open wider. Noah didn't say anything as he settled into bed. But before he closed his eyes, he looked down and whispered softly, "There you are." At 3:06 a.m., the motion alert buzzed. Emma was already awake. She unlocked her phone, pulled up the feed. Noah lay still, and beside him, for just a moment, the shadow returned. 4 points. Center of gravity low. The curve of something sitting watching, and the softest sound, a low-content exhale, like a dog finding its way back home. It happened on a Thursday night. Cold, damp, and unsettlingly still. The kind of night where even the trees seemed reluctant to move. The house had settled into its familiar routine dinner bath, Storytime lights out. Noah had fallen asleep almost instantly, curled in his usual corner at the foot of the bed. Emma sat in the hallway just outside his door, laptop open on her knees, sipping cold tea she'd forgotten an hour earlier. Kyle was in the living room, thumbing through his phone, though he hadn't truly read a word in the last half hour. The air in the house felt different that night. Denser, like something was waiting. And then the alert came. 2:17 a.m., motion detected. The camera's notification pinged Emma's phone first. She didn't move, just opened the feed. What she saw made her chest go hollow. Noah was asleep, blanket bunched at his side. But something blurred the left side of the screen. Something fast. Too fast, she rewound, frame by frame. There, a shape, a blur leaping upward onto the bed. 4 limbs, a curled tail midair, ears. The silhouette was unmistakable. A dog, and then it was gone. The next frame, empty bed. Just Noah, his face still, breath rising and falling in soft rhythm. Emma stared at the screen, unable to speak. She sent the clip to Kyle. A moment later, his voice echoed from the living room. "What the hell is this?" She found him pale, holding his phone like it had burned him. "It jumped," he said, eyes wide. "It jumped onto the bed. And then it just vanished." Emma nodded. "I saw it too." Kyle didn't blink. "We need to know what the hell this house is." By morning, he was buried in research. Property records, police logs, archived newspapers. His coffee went cold beside him. The kitchen filled with sun, but his thoughts stayed in shadow. The house had been built in 1979. It had changed hands 6 times in 25 years. No major renovations, no official red flags. But in 2010, there was an incident. A brief article in the Courier-Post newspaper. Just a paragraph tucked between larger headlines. "Dog killed in home break-in." In attempt, it read, "Authorities report that a large mixed-breed dog was found fatally injured after attempting to thwart a break-in at a suburban home in Camden County. The family was not home at the time. No arrests were made. No photo, no name, no mention of the house number. But the date matched the records of one of the previous tenants. The one who had only stayed 3 months. Kyle traced the address to a local vet clinic that had closed in 2012. He clicked through archived Yelp reviews, desperately hoping for a mention. And there it was. A comment from someone named Tracy J. "We had to bring our dog Buddy here after he got hurt defending our house from a break-in. He didn't make it. But they were so kind to us. We still miss him every day." Kyle read it twice, 3 times. Buddy? The name Noah had said the first night. The name he never forgot. He stared at the screen, a cold, aching dread forming in the center of his chest. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't a child's fantasy. Something had followed them into this house. Or maybe something had never left. Emma, meanwhile, was standing quietly outside Noah's door. The boy was napping peaceful, clutching his stuffed elephant. But Emma wasn't looking at him. She was listening. There it was again. The sound she'd been hearing for weeks. Faint, gentle, like someone exhaling near her ear. It came not from Noah, not from the monitor, but from somewhere else. A breath, soft, low, like a sigh wrapped in fur. Emma had heard it once before, 2 weeks after moving in while rocking Noah to sleep. At the time, she'd thought it was her imagination. The wind, the radiator, her own breathing in the quiet. But now she was sure. It came from the floor, from beneath the bed, from a space no heater vent or draft could explain. She closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. And there in that still moment, she felt it again. Not fear, not dread. Presence, a warmth just below the surface of the silence. Something watching, waiting, protecting. That night, they sat together in the kitchen. Emma, with her hands wrapped around a mug, Kyle scrolling slowly through old message boards about paranormal sightings and protective spirits. "I think it's him," Kyle finally said. Emma nodded. "Buddy," she whispered. "He never left," Kyle swallowed. "And Noah sees him. He always has." They sat in silence for a long moment. Then Emma asked the question neither of them wanted to say out loud. "Why now? Why us?" Kyle rubbed his eyes. Maybe he thinks Noah needs him." Emma's voice dropped. "Or maybe someone else is coming." They didn't sleep that night. Instead, they left the door to Noah's room, slightly open, and sat by the baby monitor together, breath-held tight eyes, never leaving the screen. 1:12 a.m. No motion. 2:03 a.m. Still nothing. Then 2:41. The sensor lit up. The screen flickered. Noah stirred, and then the shadow moved. This time it didn't vanish right away. It climbed up onto the bed, slowly, gently. One paw at a time. The shape was unmistakable now. A dog, large, broad-shouldered, head low in a protective posture. It turned once, settled at the foot of the bed, and then lay still. For 20 whole seconds it remained there, watching Noah, protecting him. Then the screen blinked, as if something disrupted the signal. When it came back, the dog was gone. But the imprint remained, a slight dent in the blanket, a warmth that refused to fade. Emma wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Kyle just stared, no longer trying to explain, no longer trying to deny. They both knew. Buddy was real, and he had never stopped watching. The rain came without warning, sheets of water pounding against the roof like fists. Thunder cracked the sky in uneven bursts, and wind whipped through the backyard trees, howling like something alive. The power hadn't gone out, but the lights flickered often, casting the house in momentary pulses of dim and bright. It was a night that felt wrong before anything even happened. Emma was in the kitchen holding a cup of tea she no longer wanted. Kyle was upstairs brushing his teeth. And Noah, at least from what the baby monitor showed, was asleep. His small form bundled at the foot of the bed, breathing slow, steady. Then it happened. A scream, high, raw, and ragged, ripped through the baby monitor speaker. "He's coming through the window." Emma's mug crashed to the floor. Kyle was already running. They met at Noah's door. Emma wild-eyed, Kyle pale and tight-jawed. He burst through the threshold first, nearly slipping on the hardwood. The window was open, wide. The rain had soaked the curtain. Wind was pushing it back into the room like a hand reaching inside. The night air reeked of mud bark and something metallic. Kyle rushed to the window and leaned out. Emma grabbed Noah. He was curled into a tight ball, trembling violently. "Buddy didn't let him in," he whispered, voice cracking. Buddy growled. He growled so loud. Emma cradled him, whispering softly, eyes darting back to Kyle. Kyle scanned the backyard. His breath fogged the air. Nothing. Then movement. A figure, dark and lurching, disappearing into the line of trees behind the fence. For a split second, Kyle caught the glint of something metallic at the man's waist, maybe a tool, maybe a flashlight. Then it was gone, swallowed by the storm. Without thinking, Kyle sprinted down the stairs and out the back door barefoot. Rain lashed his face. He crossed the yard in seconds, water soaking his shirt mud, pulling at his steps. He hit the fence and scanned left, then right. The figure was gone. But something remained, half buried in a patch of wet earth beneath the window, a black glove torn at the wrist. Kyle bent to pick it up. The leather was fresh, not weather-worn. Inside a tag XL, too big for anyone in the house, too big for coincidence. Back inside, Noah clung to Emma like she was the last safe thing in the world. He wasn't crying anymore, but his eyes were wide alert. His small chest rose and fell in quick bursts. Emma pressed her cheek to his forehead. "You're okay, baby. You're okay now." He pulled back slightly and whispered, Buddy barked so loud. He scared him. Emma stroked his hair. Did you see the man? Noah nodded. He climbed. But Buddy was already there. He jumped at him. Jumped at who? The bad man. Buddy was growling. His eyes were like fire. Emma swallowed. Could you see him, sweetie, Buddy? Noah nodded slowly. Where was he? He pointed under the bed. There. Then he pointed at the window. And then there. Emma stared, her mouth dry. You saw him move. Noah nodded again. He's faster than people. When Kyle came back in, drenched and shaking, he was holding the glove in a towel. There was someone, he said flatly. I saw him. He ran into the woods. Emma's face drained of color. Kyle continued, voice tight. I don't know how he got up there, but he was trying to come in. They looked at each other. No one said it, but they were both thinking the same thing. Why? Kyle called the police. 2 officers arrived within 30 minutes wearing raincoats and skepticism. They scanned the area, took the glove, asked questions. But there were no footprints. They'd all been drowned in the storm. No fingerprints on the window latch. No pry marks. Nothing. We'll file a report, one of the officers said. But with no evidence, it's unlikely anything will come of it. Emma bristled. A grown man tried to climb into our child's bedroom. You don't think that's serious? He shrugged. Probably some drifter looking for shelter. You're lucky he got scared off. Kyle showed them the baby monitor clip. The scream. The moment the camera glitched, then showed Noah staring straight at the lens, whispering, he's here. The officer watched without expression. We'll keep a patrol car nearby for a couple of days. Let us know if anything else happens. And then they were gone, like it was over. But it wasn't over. Not even close. Later that night, Emma checked the camera footage again. The moment before Noah screamed, the shadows shifted. Not just one, 2. One vertical, human, unmistakable, at the window. The other lower, crouched. Leaner, 4-legged. It had stood between Noah and the intruder. Then in a flash, gone. She paused the frame. Zoomed in. It was blurry, distorted. But the silhouette was clear enough. A dog, mid-snarl, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Kyle sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his forehead. He protected him, Emma said quietly, still staring at the screen. Kyle didn't respond. He was there before we were, and he's still here. Kyle looked at her. But why is this happening now? Emma closed the laptop gently. I think it always was happening, she said. We just finally saw it. Later, when the house was quiet and Noah was asleep again, they sat together in his room. The window was locked, nailed shut. The monitor was on, and under the bed, there was only silence. Until Emma leaned her head back against the wall and whispered, thank you. She didn't know why she said it out loud. But in the hush that followed, the camera blinked once. The screen pulsed, and somewhere almost too soft to hear, a breath. Warm, steady, guarding. Buddy hadn't left. Not tonight. Not ever. Rain still trickled off the gutters in the early gray of morning when the second patrol car arrived. 2 officers stepped out, different from the pair the night before, but carrying the same weight of disbelief behind their eyes. Their boots left trails of mud on the front porch as they entered, their radios crackling with weather updates and mundane dispatches from somewhere far less haunted than here. Kyle led them to Noah's room. This is where he tried to come in. The window had been nailed shut at the corners, the frame swollen from water and bent ever so slightly at the latch. One of the officers bent down, inspected the sill, ran a gloved finger over the wood. No clear pry marks, he muttered. Emma stood by the door, arms folded, eyes sharp. He was in the yard, she said firmly. My husband saw him run. The officer stood and offered a careful smile, the one that says, we're listening, but not really hearing. Any idea who it might have been? No, Kyle said. But it wasn't random. He came for the window. And your son, he was the one who saw him first. Kyle nodded. He screamed. Said someone was coming through the glass. The officers exchanged a look. And how old is your son? 3, Emma said quickly. But he's not making this up. We're not suggesting he is one of them, replied. But you know how children dream, especially during storms. Lightning, shadows. Kyle walked over to the dresser. He didn't dream it. And there's something else. He picked up the tablet and pulled up the monitor footage. The video played on the small screen, dim and slightly garbled, but unmistakable. The scream, the flash of movement, the brief image, something dark, fast at the edge of the frame. And then, the growl. The low, guttural sound that didn't belong to a child or a person. It rattled the speaker with surprising force. A sound that vibrated in your chest, that carried teeth and warning. The officers stiffened slightly. "There a dog in the house?" one asked. Kyle shook his head. "We don't own a dog." Emma stepped forward. "We never have." Silence. Then could be interference. Could be the mic picking up external noise. Emma frowned. From inside the room, the officer didn't respond. The second one stepped toward the monitor camera mounted high in the corner. "This the only one you have?" Kyle nodded. "There's a motion sensor too. It lit up last night before the scream." They noted that, wrote it down, asked a few more questions. When they were done, the lead officer gave them a card. "Call if anything happens again," he said. "We'll do another patrol tonight. But until we get something solid, there's not much we can follow." And then they were gone, leaving behind a house more unsettled than before. Kyle didn't say much that day. He moved through the motions, cleaning the mud by the door, refastening the window boards, checking the back fence again and again. But in the quiet moments, he sat with the footage on loop, watching, rewatching, frame by frame, the sound, the shadow, the shift in Noah's expression right before the scream, as if something had stepped between him and a nightmare. It was a look of recognition, not panic, of trust. Kyle didn't believe in ghosts, never had. He was a hardware guy, a cause and effect man. But now he couldn't shake the feeling that something in the house was realer than belief. Emma stayed inside with Noah, reading to him from his favorite book about forest animals. He didn't seem shaken anymore. If anything, he was calmer, safer. "Buddy got angry," he said between pages. "He made the man run." Emma tried not to react. "Do you see Buddy right now?" she asked softly. Noah shook his head. "He's not here. He only comes when it's scary." Emma held her breath. "But you're not scared anymore," he smiled. "Not when he's near." That afternoon, while Noah napped, Emma sat with her laptop at the kitchen table, sunlight filtering in through the blinds in fractured lines. She'd been typing variations of the same search for hours. Camden County break-in dog killed. Home invasion, New Jersey, 2010. Dog attack. Dog dies protecting family. NJ, 2010. Most results were dead ends. But finally a link. An archived newspaper snippet from 2010. She clicked. The page loaded slowly, its formatting broken with age. But the words were clear. Camden County, August 19th, 2010. A mixed-breed dog was killed during a break-in attempt at a family home off Hollow Creek Road. Authorities say the intruder was likely scared off after a violent struggle with the animal. No arrests were made. The homeowners returned to find their door forced open and the dog fatally injured near the back entrance. The dog named Buddy had belonged to the family for 6 years. Emma stared at the screen. Buddy, the name Noah had used from the start. The same year the house was empty for months. The same road, the same layout. Even the back door description matched the one now nailed shut in their kitchen. She sat back in her chair. Buddy had died in this house, protecting someone, and now he was doing it again. She printed the article, her hands shaking slightly, and brought it to Kyle. He read it silently, jaw clenched. Emma whispered, "What if he never left?" Kyle looked up, eyes darker than usual. Then he's still doing what he died trying to do, protecting a child. This time their child. Kyle closed his laptop, folded the article in half, and put it on the fridge with a magnet. It felt like a memorial, not of loss, but of loyalty and deep enduring love. That night, as the house darkened and Noah climbed into bed, Emma sat beside him, smoothing his hair. "Do you think Buddy will come tonight?" she asked. Noah looked up at her, calm and clear. "He's always here," he said, "even if you can't see him." And beneath the floorboards, the silence stretched, steady, warm, and watchful. Waiting, listening, ready. It started with a loose board, not just creaky loose. Warped at the edges, groaning louder than usual every time someone stepped near the foot of Noah's bed. Emma had tripped over it twice. Kyle nearly broke his toe. So on a dry Sunday afternoon, they finally decided to fix it. Kyle brought up a crowbar and a flashlight. Emma sat with Noah on the hallway rug watching cartoons. The light from the bedroom window spilled across the wooden floor in narrow beams, catching every mote of dust as if the house was holding its breath. The first plank came up with a dry crack, and with it, a smell, not foul, not moldy, but old, like damp soil sealed off for years, a scent that didn't belong in a nursery. Kyle pried up another board and leaned into the gap, holding the flashlight with shaking fingers. He expected insulation, maybe a mouse nest, something ordinary, but what he found was anything but ordinary. At first, it looked like a piece of twisted wire. Then he pulled it into the light. A collar, old, leather but barely holding shape. The edges were frayed, the surface stiff and dark with time. It had a buckle still intact, rusted but functional, and dangling from it a tag, oval-shaped, brass, a thin crack down the center. On its surface, almost too worn to read, were 5 letters, B-U-D-D-Y. Kyle didn't move for several seconds. Then Emma. She came in, took one look, and froze. He handed it to her gently, as if it might fall apart in her hands. She turned it over, traced the name with her thumb. It wasn't just a name, it was confirmation. Proof. Where was it, she asked. Beneath the boards, buried under dirt and old cloth. Emma looked at the collar, then at the floor, then back at the collar again, her face pale. Noah had walked in quietly behind them. He stood now in the doorway, eyes wide. And when he saw the collar, he lit up. That's it, he said, running forward. That's Buddy's. Emma knelt to his level. You know this. He nodded, took it in his hands like it was sacred. He showed me in a dream. This is his. Kyle met Emma's eyes. She wasn't blinking. Noah held the collar against his chest. I told you, he whispered. He's real. Emma couldn't speak. Instead, she wrapped her arms around him and pulled him close. She didn't cry often. But this time the tears came fast, full of release. Not from fear, but from belief. Everything, every whisper, every night of tension, every moment she doubted her own instincts suddenly snapped into shape. Buddy was never just a story. They cleaned the collar gently as best they could. It was too fragile to wear, too sacred to hide. So Emma placed it in a small wooden shadow box she found at the antique store in town. It sat now beside Noah's bed, angled just right, so that the evening sun would catch it. Do you think he likes it there? Emma asked Noah as they tucked him in that night. He says yes, Noah said confidently. Emma smoothed the blanket over his small frame. He's lucky to have you. Noah shook his head. I'm lucky. He picked me. She smiled. Then Noah added something that made her stop cold. He said the collar's where he waited. For a long time. Until we came. Emma looked at the floorboards. At the dark gap beneath them, now covered again. The place where the collar had waited in silence for over a decade. A place no one would have thought to look. Except maybe a boy who saw through shadows. Kyle took the night shift with the monitor again. He didn't question what he'd seen anymore. He didn't try to explain it away with logic or code or gear. He just watched. And sometime around 2:11 a.m. the screen shifted. Noah stirred barely, rolled onto his side. And behind him, no blur this time, no static movement. A shape rose from the shadow under the bed, slow and solid. A dog, large with a proud, noble build. Its coat, dark eyes, soft glowing just faintly from the monitor's infrared. It stepped lightly, carefully onto the bed and lay down beside Noah. Then, almost imperceptibly, it turned its head and looked directly at the camera. Kyle felt his throat tighten. The dog didn't move, didn't growl, didn't bark. It just looked. A look not of threat, but of recognition. Then it lay its head on Noah's blanket and stayed perfectly still. Kyle let the camera roll, let it watch, because he finally understood. This wasn't a haunting. This was a vow. The next morning, Noah woke up early. He tiptoed into the kitchen, dragging his stuffed elephant behind him. Emma was already up, sipping coffee, eyes soft with yesterday's emotion. He climbed into her lap and held the stuffed toy close. Then he said, Buddy says he doesn't want to leave anymore. Emma kissed his head. He doesn't have to. That afternoon, they framed the newspaper article beside the collar. 2 pieces of a life that had once been flesh and fur and fierce protection, and now was something more. Not memory, presence. Every so often, when the house grew quiet and the wind moved through the trees just right, Emma would swear she heard it. A breath, a step, a rustle of motion on the floor. And in those moments, she didn't feel fear. She felt gratitude. Because somewhere in that space between shadow and light, Buddy was still here, still watching, still home. The old woman hadn't stepped outside in days. Emma noticed the silence first. No creaking screen door, no whistled tune floating from across the hedge. Just stillness pressed into the white-painted porch of the house next door. Mrs. Clara Pennington was the kind of neighbor who always knew a little more than she let on. She had a sharp tongue, sharp eyes, and as Emma had come to suspect, a long memory for pain. So Emma came with an offering, a printout of the newspaper article, a photo of the collar, and Noah's drawing. Buddy curled beneath his bed, his tail curled around his paws, eyes glowing gently in the dark. When Clara opened the door, She didn't look surprised. She looked like someone who'd been expecting a ghost to knock. Emma held the collar up wordlessly. Clara went pale. "That's his," she said after a long silence. "God help me, I'd know it anywhere." They sat at her kitchen table, the collar resting between them like an artifact. Clara's fingers hovered over it, but never touched it, as though contact might wake something long buried. Emma spoke softly. "You knew him?" Clara nodded. He was a big old mutt. Brown, strong legs, white paw. Not pretty, but proud. Loyal to the end. Emma leaned in. What happened to him? Clara looked out the window for a long moment. Then she told the story. It was summer, 2010. Hot as hell. The family living there, then they had a little girl. Maybe 6, maybe 7. Quiet child. Always drawing on the porch. Her dad worked nights, and one evening, someone tried to break in through the back window. Clara's voice dropped like the words themselves hurt to say. No one knows how he got in. But they say Buddy was already inside. Probably sensed something hours earlier. He always had that look like he was waiting for the world to turn wrong. Emma's fingers tightened around her mug. Did he attack the intruder? Clara nodded slowly. He fought. God, did he fight? Neighbors heard it growling, crashing, the girl screaming. When they got there, the back door was busted. Blood on the floor. And Buddy was gone. Emma blinked. Gone. They never found him. Just his collar in the garden. And blood. A lot of it. Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. And the girl, unharmed, Clara said. Not a scratch. She said he pushed her under the bed and wouldn't let anyone near. A long silence stretched between them. Clara reached out finally and traced the edge of the collar with a wrinkled fingertip. I always believed he was still there, she whispered. He didn't run. He didn't die like a dog. He disappeared like a soul that hadn't finished what it came to do. Emma felt something deep shift in her chest. Like the truth had always been there, but now it had a shape, a name, a face. Buddy. That night, after tucking Noah in, Emma placed the collar, now cleaned, preserved inside a wooden frame. Next to it, she placed a photo she'd printed from the footage, the only clear silhouette they had taken from the night Buddy had jumped onto the bed. You couldn't see detail, but the outline was clear. A dog, mid-guard, solid, present. She propped the frame on the dresser, angled slightly toward the bed. Noah watched silently from beneath his blanket. You think he'll like it? She asked. Noah nodded. He says thank you. Emma swallowed. Does he know we love him? Noah blinked slowly. He already did. That night, the monitor recorded something new. The timestamp read 3:06 a.m. The air was still. Noah slept without stirring. And then the shadow emerged, not a blur, not a flicker, but a full form. Buddy, no longer a trick of light. No longer a suspicion in the corner of the frame. There he was, his body stretched out beneath the bed, massive and calm. Ears slightly back-tail still. His eyes glowed faintly in the infrared light, but there was no menace in them, only patience. He didn't move. He just lay there, like he had 1,000 nights before, guarding, waiting, watching over the one he had chosen. Emma stood in the hallway, tears silently tracking down her cheeks, the glow of the monitor bathing her face. Kyle came beside her, barely breathing. It's him, he whispered. She nodded. They stood there a long time, hands clasped, watching as the shadow stayed perfectly still. And in that quiet, unblinking frame, they saw something they never thought possible. Not a ghost, not a figment, but a friend. Still here, still loyal, still the good kind of darkness. The house was asleep when it began. Not quiet as usual asleep, not storybook calm, but the kind of sleep that precedes storms, the heavy hush before something breaks. Outside, the trees stood still. The wind didn't move. Even the crickets were silent. Then beep, beep, beep. The alarm system shattered the silence. 3 short bursts, 1 long. Motion detected. Zone 3, rear entry. Kyle sat up instantly. Emma was already halfway out of bed, adrenaline roaring. They bolted into the hallway, feet pounding against the floor. Noah's door was open. And his bed? Empty. Emma's voice cracked the way only a mother's could. The blanket was still warm. The window they had nailed shut, pried open. Call them, Kyle barked, grabbing the flashlight and racing outside. Emma fumbled her phone with shaking hands. Her voice into the receiver was barely intelligible. A patrol car was already close. They had kept one nearby ever since the last incident, but not close enough. The woods behind the house swallowed sound like a mouth. Kyle's flashlight beam sliced through the trees, every step deeper, turning into something primal. Then, a flash of movement. To the left, low and fast, he ran. Branches whipped against his arms, rain from earlier slicked the ground. Leaves clung to his shoes. Then, a cry. Small, fragile. Noah. He turned toward it, heart slamming his ribs. Another cry, muffled, and then something else. A grunt. A man's voice. Agitated, labored. Kyle burst through a wall of brush and saw it. Noah. Being dragged. A figure hunched over him, one hand around the boy's chest, the other holding a knife. Kyle shouted a sound that was not language, only rage. The man turned, and in that split second the forest exploded. A blur from the left. Brown, furious, four-legged. Buddy? He hit the man like a truck, a mass of snarling muscle and fury. The intruder fell back, screaming, the knife tumbling from his hand. Noah scrambled free. Kyle surged forward, scooping his son into his arms. Noah clung to him, breathless, sobbing into his shoulder. The man writhed on the ground, his arm raised. Then a yelp, high, painful. Buddy was gone. Just gone. In his place, only deep bleeding gashes on the man's forearm. 3 perfect slashes. The flashlight rolled, landed in the mud, and illuminated the attacker's face, white, terrified. His eyes darting into the dark around him. "There's a dog!" "Dog," he screamed, writhing. "A effing dog." It came out of nowhere. It bit me. It had glowing eyes. Footsteps pounded behind them. Flashlights, voices, the snapping of branches. 2 officers pushed through the trees, guns drawn. The man didn't fight. He didn't even speak. He just kept repeating in a broken whisper, "Where is it? Where is it?" It was right there. It was real. Back at the house, Noah, wrapped in blankets, safe in Emma's arms, stared out the back window. He knew he whispered. Emma knelt. Who did? Buddy. He was waiting. Kyle came in, face scratched, shirt torn. He knelt beside them. His hands shook as he touched Noah's cheek. "We got him," he whispered. "He's not coming back." Noah looked past them toward the trees. "He never got past Buddy." In the yard, police lights cast red and blue flashes against the wet grass. The man was cuffed, sitting in the back of the cruiser, head low. An officer approached Kyle. "Your son's lucky." Kyle nodded slowly. "We all are." The officer hesitated. "What made you think to run out there so fast?" Kyle's eyes shifted to the trees, then to the baby monitor footage still playing in his pocket. The growl, the shadow, the flash of brown fur leaping past the bed. He didn't answer the officer. He didn't need to. Some truths don't live in words. That night, when the house finally quieted, Kyle rewound the footage one last time. 4:42 a.m. Camera view Noah's bed. Still, empty. Then motion blur, window open. The intruder steps in, 1 foot, then another. But before he takes a third, a shape already there, under the bed, watching, waiting. And when the man moves, attack. Fast, fluid, perfectly timed. The image flickers, then for 3 full seconds frozen. Buddy, mid-leap, mouth open, eyes bright, saving Noah. Again. Still, Kyle didn't press play again. He just stared and whispered, "Thank you." Noah slept through the rest of the night for the first time in weeks, without stirring once. And beneath his bed the monitor blinked. Still, silent, but never empty. The man didn't speak much after his arrest. Not to the police, not to his lawyer, not to the paramedics, cleaning the claw marks from his forearm. His eyes stayed fixed on the tree line behind the house, lips twitching like he was trying to repeat something he couldn't understand. It took 2 days for the full story to come together. The break-in, the wounds, the prints, and finally the match. 15 years earlier, in the same house, a home invasion had gone unsolved. No suspects, no leads, just blood. A missing family dog, and a little girl saved by something no one could explain. Until now, fingerprints recovered from the old case were run again, this time, through a federal database updated sharper. The man who tried to take Noah was the same man who'd come all those years ago. He had returned, and this time someone had been waiting. The police report didn't mention the dog. There was no space on the form for ghosts. No box to check for loyalty that outlives death. But Emma and Kyle knew. So did the officers who heard the man screaming in the woods. So did Noah, especially Noah. That afternoon, after the house was calm again, after the cameras were checked, and the windows resecured and the whispers of terror pushed back beneath the floorboards, Noah walked with Emma into the yard. The sun filtered softly through the leaves, and birds had begun to return to the trees, like the house had exhaled a fear it had carried too long. Noah stood still, pointed, toward the edge of the woods. "He's not here anymore," he said. Emma knelt beside him. "Buddy?" Noah nodded. He left last night. I felt it. Emma's heart tugged. Where did he go? Noah didn't answer right away. He looked toward the trees, eyes squinting into the light. Then he whispered. He finished what he came to do. Emma swallowed hard. Does it feel different? Noah nodded slowly, quiet, but not empty. Then he smiled barely. I still hear him. Sometimes. She brushed a lock of hair from his forehead. What do you hear? His voice dropped to a whisper. Breathing. That night, Emma placed the photo frame on the nightstand beside Noah's bed. Inside was the cleaned collar Buddy's name tag, gently polished, and next to it a picture drawn by Noah. Crayon lines, rough and childlike. A boy, a dog, and under the drawing an uneven scrawl. You found me. Emma sat beside the bed longer than usual, watching the shadows shift in the corners of the room. There was no fear in them now. They weren't darker than before. Just softer. She kissed Noah's forehead, brushed the blanket up to his chin, and turned off the lamp. The monitor blinked on. The screen held still, and under the bed, no shape. No blur. No glow. Just a hush and a warmth, like the last breath of someone you love, left behind to remind you you're never truly alone. Downstairs, Kyle stood at the back window, staring at the line of trees. He held the newspaper article in one hand, and in the other, an old photo the vet's office had finally mailed them. Buddy, brown with one white paw, mouth open like he was laughing, or barking, or both. Kyle pinned it to the wall beside the kitchen light switch. A place you couldn't miss. A place of honor. He didn't say much, just whispered like someone standing at a grave. You did it, buddy, and then turned off the lights. Sometime deep in the night, when even the wind had stopped moving, the camera caught one last frame. A shape, brief, blurred. A tail, a silhouette, mid-step, crossing just beyond the foot of the bed. And then, nothing. Stillness, like something had paused to say goodbye. Before finally resting, they never heard from him again. Not in footsteps, not in growls, not in sudden shadows that moved on their own, but in breath, in peace, in the weight of love that stayed long after the body was gone. Noah still kept a spot beneath his bed clear, just in case. And sometimes when he couldn't sleep, he'd look into the dark and whisper, "Good night, buddy." And somewhere far beyond sound, the dark would whisper back. There was a time when Kyle didn't believe in anything he couldn't take apart. Wires, lenses, gears. These were things that made sense. Motion detectors, power surges, false alarms, problems with names and fixes. Ghosts known, spirits numb. A dead dog, still watching over a child, 15 years later. No, but now, every time he passed the photo on the kitchen wall, every time he saw the small paw-shaped cookie jar next to the coffee maker, he nodded slightly. Like an acknowledgement, a thank you. He never said the words out loud, not fully, but they were there. In the quiet way, he pressed his hand to the framed collar. In how he now always left the hallway light dim, not off. In how he never ever closed Noah's bedroom door. Something had changed in him. Something had opened. He didn't believe in ghosts. He believed in Buddy, and that was enough. The corner shelf was Emma's idea. They cleared a spot beside the living room window where sunlight hit in the morning. Not a shrine, just a memory built from pieces that had become sacred. The photo, the collar, the old brass tag dulled with time. Beside it, a hand-drawn sign scrawled in red and blue crayon. "Thank you, Buddy." Noah had made it himself. There was also a tiny bowl with 3 dog biscuits unchanged each week, replaced by Emma in quiet routine. And next to that, a stack of crayon drawings, Noah's sketches of Buddy chasing shadows, playing fetch with invisible sticks, guarding the bed like a knight. Sometimes visitors asked who the dog was. Sometimes Emma told them. Sometimes she didn't. She wrote the story late one night after Noah was asleep and Kyle was fixing a loose drawer in the garage. The words came slowly at first, then all at once. Not a horror story, not a ghost tale, but a thank you letter. To something beyond flesh, to something that stayed. He was a protector in life, and even more in death. He waited in the dark, not to haunt, but to hold vigil. Over our child. Over this house. Over the wounds time never fully closed. He wasn't ours. But he became part of our family. Buddy, wherever you are, this is for you, a loyal friend, who lived, died, and still stood between fear and innocence. You didn't need to be seen to matter. You were never invisible to us. She sent it to the local paper with trembling fingers. They published it a week later under the title, "The Dog Beneath the Bed." A true story of loyalty that defied death. Neighbors called. Strangers wrote letters. Some shared their own stories of pets that returned in dreams, of the feeling of paws brushing their ankles in the night, of shadows that weren't lonely but loyal. Emma kept every letter. She showed them to Noah. He smiled proudly. "Buddy has more friends now," he said. One morning, months after the break-in, Noah came into the kitchen with a bowl of cereal he'd poured himself. "Can I take Buddy to school?" he asked. Emma smiled. "Buddy can't come to school, sweetie." Noah didn't argue. He just looked at the drawing corner. "I'll tell him about it," he said. She crouched down. "Think he'll like it. He'll wait under my bed until I come back." Emma kissed his forehead. "Then he'll be right where you left him." That night, Kyle found her sitting beside the memory shelf. The light from the window stretched long across the floor. "I used to think stories like this were for weak people," he said quietly. Emma looked up. "I thought needing a ghost meant you couldn't let go." He reached out, touching the edge of the framed photo. "But maybe some things stay not because we need them." He looked at her. "Maybe they stay because they need to finish what they started." Emma said nothing. She just nodded. And together they stood in the golden light, watching the dust dance through the room, like breath, like movement, like memory. Noah never forgot Buddy, even as the years passed, even as the monsters under the bed disappeared, and he stopped asking to keep the door open at night. But he always kept space, a small sacred shadow under the bed. And once in a while, when the wind blew just right and the world went still, he'd smile and whisper, "Still got my back, huh?" And somewhere in the quiet, something breathed in reply. The nursery looked different now, not because the furniture had changed. Noah's small bed still sat in the corner, the same faded blue comforter pulled neatly. Every morning, the same bookshelf filled with animal stories and picture books. But something in the air had shifted. As if the walls themselves had exhaled a burden they'd carried quietly for too long. Noah was 4 now, a year older, taller, surer on his feet and his thoughts. He asked more questions, made fewer demands. He no longer clung to shadows the way he once did. He didn't need the nightlight anymore. Not since Buddy left. Not since that final night. The night the growl turned to silence, the threat vanished into cuffs, and the woods gave back what it had once nearly taken. Now he slept in darkness, and he was never afraid. It was Emma who noticed first, quietly, without comment, that Noah no longer curled at the foot of the bed. He stretched out now, head on his pillow. Feet dangling near the edge, he didn't tuck his blanket beneath him or leave space beneath the frame. The spot under the bed was empty, but not forgotten. One spring morning, soft light streaming through the curtains in clean shafts of gold. Emma entered Noah's room with a folded shirt and a sleepy smile. The monitor camera still blinked steadily on its shelf, a habit no one had bothered to break. Noah was already sitting up. Hair, messy eyes, bright face aglow in the early light. "You're up early," she said. "I heard the birds." She sat beside him, brushing a hand through his tangled hair. "Did you sleep okay?" He nodded. "Did you have any dreams?" Noah tilted his head. "Not really." Then he paused as if remembering something. "I saw Buddy," he said softly. Emma's breath caught. She waited. He wasn't under the bed anymore. No. Noah placed a hand on his chest. "He's here now." She blinked. "Inside you." Noah smiled. "Yep." Emma leaned down and kissed his forehead. "I think you're right." And she meant it. Not as a metaphor, not as a comfort, but as something real. Something passed on, not just in memory, but in courage, in instinct, in the quiet knowledge of protection. Buddy had become part of Noah, not as a ghost, not as a shadow, but as something stronger, as a presence that no longer had to stand guard because his job was done. Later that day, Noah brought out his old drawing supplies, the crayons and construction paper now replaced with markers and tiny paint pots. He sat on the floor humming to himself, painting slowly, deliberately. Emma and Kyle watched from the hallway, not interrupting. When he was done, he held it up proudly. A forest clearing. A boy. A shadow with 4 legs walking just ahead, and a line scribbled beneath in uneven handwriting. "Some shadows stay to keep us safe." Kyle wiped his eyes before Noah turned around. That night, the monitor caught one last moment. It was subtle, unremarkable. A shift in light, a ripple across the lens as dawn broke, and the room filled with gold and warmth. Noah stirred, turned over in his sleep. The monitor blinked, and for a single second, there it was. A tail, low, wagging gently, crossing just outside the edge of the bed frame. A silent goodbye. Or maybe not a goodbye at all. Just a reminder. The footage cut a second later. Static. Then nothing. But when Emma reviewed it later alone at the kitchen table, she smiled through the tears she didn't wipe away, because it meant he was still near. Not trapped, not haunting, but watching, always watching. In the corner of the nursery, the framed collar stayed in place. Beside it, a new addition, a drawing Noah had made with help from his teacher, Buddy the Brave. He stood in armor helmet, shield tail curled like a banner. At his feet, a sleeping child safe in dreams. Above them, both words Noah had whispered before falling asleep days ago. He made the dark good. The story never really left their house, not in the way stories usually fade. Emma's letter was reprinted in 2 more papers. People wrote from other towns, other states. Some shared memories. Some asked for updates. Some sent photos of their own dogs living and gone. It became something larger than any of them expected. But in the house, the story was smaller, quieter. It lived in morning light, in soft breathing, in the way Kyle reached for the light switch and left it halfway, in the way Noah spoke to shadows not with fear, but with familiarity. Not all darkness is evil. Some shadows stay to protect us, and one had, for as long as Noah had needed him, until the boy no longer needed the protection, because now he was the light. And the dog had become part of the dark, the good kind.